I joined the government's Department of Unexplained Cases a few weeks after my brother disappeared. I was 34, a forensic investigator, and I thought I could handle anything. My first day felt normal at first. The office was run down, like a relic from forgotten time. The air was thick with dust. I sat at my messy desk, stacks of files towering beside me. I flipped open a file, expecting the usual procedural details. But then I found something strange. A file marked top secret. I couldn't help myself. I wanted to know more. As I read, I felt a chill creep up my spine. It was just about a disappearance. It included bizarre rules. The first one said, "Do not look in mirrors after sunset." I laughed, thinking it was absurd, but the laugh felt hollow. Throughout the day, I felt eyes on me, like I was alone. I heard whispers, soft and distant, but when I looked up, nobody was there. I tried to shake it off, but dread filled me every time I opened another file. I sensed they were all connected somehow. Were these rules warnings? I needed to find answers. The next day, while reviewing my notes, I noticed symbols drawn in the margins. They weren't my writing, and I couldn't figure out where they had come from. My colleagues moved around me like shadows, whispering and glancing away when I met their eyes. One of them finally locked eyes with me, his face pale as he said, "Be careful how deep you go." An uneasy knot formed in my stomach. Part of me thought I should listen. Days went by, and I pushed on with my investigation. The oddities only grew. One investigator flinched when I mentioned my brother's name. Their fear pierced through me. I felt like I was digging up buried secrets, but every turn brought darkness. One night, I stayed late, determined to solve it. The office was empty. As I read through more files, I heard a low whisper drift through the stillness. My name. I froze in place. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. When I looked around, I saw no one. Then I found it, the second rule. Do not speak the name of the lost. I stared at it. That was my brother's name. My breath quickened. Did I just break some unspoken law? The lights flickered overhead, and an icy dread filled the room. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, reaching for me. In the corner of my vision, I saw movement. Something stood just beyond the doorway. It asked, "What do you want to know?" I turned my head slowly. My breath hitched. Nobody was there. I felt like I had lost control. Panic surged through me. What had I gotten myself into? I attempted to shake it off, but deep down, I knew there was no escape now. I had unleashed something beyond my understanding. Why had I awakened with that name? The following morning, I stumbled into the office, still shaken from the previous night's encounter. My mind raced, replaying the whisper and the shadow. I knew I needed to push on, but the lingering dread made it hard to focus. Could whatever ID awakened be linked to my brother? As I sat at my desk, I noticed a folder that hadn't been there before. It was thin, dark, and unmarked, almost blending into the clutter surrounding it. I hesitated, my instincts screaming to leave it alone. But curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly opened it. Inside were printed emails, the sender blocked, but the content was chilling. They detailed cases similar to my brother's disappearance, each one accompanied by those confounding rules. The third rule stood out. Do not seek the truth unless you are prepared to lose everything. Fear gripped me. What did that mean? I shuffled through more papers, looking for answers, but the weight of that warning hung heavy over me. Just as I was about to close the folder, I noticed a name at the bottom of an email thread. It was familiar, but I couldn't place. I teed him why colleagues drifted by, their eyes averted, moving like smoke across a flame. I caught the rushing sound of whispers again, their words barely audible. I leaned in, hoping to catch something useful. All I heard was a muffled warning. Don't linger in the dark. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, I felt urgency rise within me. That's when I decided to speak to the investigator who had flinched at the mention of my brother. I had to know what they were hiding. I found him in the break room, still and quiet like a deer caught in headlights. Can you tell me why you reacted like that? I asked, my voice lower than I intended. He looked up, his expression haunted. You should stop now. Just leave it. It's not safe. A chill crawled up my spine. What do you know? He shook his head, his hands trembling. Some things are better left buried. You don't understand what you're dealing with. My heart raced. This wasn't just a disappearance. It was something much darker. Each response only led to more questions. I needed proof. I turned to leave, but just before exiting, I caught a glimpse of something behind him in the reflection of the microwave. For a split second, I saw a shadow looming. I blinked and it was gone. Was this what they meant by losing everything? I wondered if I was already too deep. Walking back to my desk, I felt a tightening in my chest. My mind raced through the rules and my brother's fate. The whispers grew louder, swelling around me, pulsing with an energy that felt threatening. Then the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. In that moment, I heard a voice, cold as ice, say, "The truth comes at a cost." I stumbled backward, my heart in my throat. What would it take to find my brother? And what would happen next? I stood in the dark, breathing heavily. The words echoed in my mind. The truth comes at a cost. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to focus. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. As the lights flickered back on, I caught a glimpse of the folder still open on my desk, papers scattered. I gathered myself and flipped through the emails again. Another name jumped out, a name I recognized. It belonged to a colleague who had left the department under questionable circumstances. My fingers trembled as I typed her name into the search bar of my computer. Stories floated back. She was obsessed with cases like my brother's, drawn to the shadows like a moth to a flame. Was she still out there? Maybe she held the key to unraveling this. I remembered the last time I saw her. She was pale, eyes wide with fear, as if she had seen something she shouldn't. The details slipped away, but the weight of her words lingered. You have to be careful. Don't dig too deep. Ignoring my instincts, I decided to reach out. I found her contact information buried deep in a forgotten email, and I hesitated before dialing. Just as I hit send, the lights flickered again, casting long shadows across the room. "Hello." Her voice came through the line, shaky but familiar. "It's me," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "I found some information about my brother, and I think it's connected to your case." There was silence. Then she whispered, "You shouldn't have called. It's worse than you think. Please, I need your help. I can't back away now. You need to understand. You're playing with fire," she said, urgency lacing her words. "Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks tonight. But don't tell anyone. They're watching." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I blinked at my phone, a mix of dread and determination coursing through me. I had to see her. If there was anyone who could help me make sense of the darkness creeping into my life, it was her. But as my day dragged on, fear clawed at my chest. What did she mean by "they're watching"? Who was they? My instincts screamed at me to be careful. But my brother's face kept appearing in my mind, blank, searching. The office felt oppressive as the clock inched toward the end of the workday. I avoided eye contact with my colleagues, their whispering voices like a swarm of flies buzzing around my ears. I left my desk early, heart pounding. Night fell, and I parked outside the warehouse, the place cloaked in shadows. I scanned the area, half expecting something to jump out from the darkness. My gut twisted with unease. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Relief flooded through me as it was her. But something in her eyes gave me pause. Was it fear or warning? Before I could speak, she grabbed my wrist, pulling me aside. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice urgent. "You're not safe here. They're closer than you think. We need to move." Just then, I heard a noise behind me, a rustling. I turned, heart racing. Someone was coming. "Go, now," she urged, dragging me into the shadows as footsteps echoed closer. I hesitated, but I trusted her instincts. I had to find answers, but at what cost? In that moment, I realized I was in deeper than I ever intended. The truth was not just lurking, it was hunting me. We ducked into the narrow alley beside the warehouse, the cool air wrapping around us like a cloak. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the sound of footsteps drawing nearer. I could see her tense, ready to bolt at the slightest hint of danger. "Do you have a car?" she whispered urgently. I nodded, barely able to form words. We moved quickly, trying our best to stay silent. I thought of my brother, the unanswered questions swirling in my mind like a storm. I didn't want to think about what would happen if we got caught. As we approached my car, She pulled me to a stop. We can't stay here. They might have seen us. We need to find a place where we can talk safely. I glanced around, my pulse quickening. What do you mean, they? Who are we talking about? She paused, her eyes darting to the shadows. Government agents, perhaps. People who don't want the truth to come out. They're involved in the same cases we were working on, and it goes deeper than either of us realized. The weight of her words settled heavily on my shoulders. My mind raced. Everything we had been investigating could suddenly be a threat, not just to my brother, but to both of us. That we got into the car and I started the engine, the sound breaking the stillness. Where do we go? I asked, try to maintain control amid the chaos. Just drive. I'll tell you when to stop. I pulled out onto the dimly lit street, the night air thick with tension. I concentrated on the road ahead, desperate to get as far away from the warehouse as possible. In the rearview mirror, I swore I saw something move, a shadow darting along behind us. Did you see that? I asked, voice low. She nodded, her fear palpable. I think they might be following us. Just keep driving. We turned onto a quieter road, the streetlights flickering like weak candles against the creeping darkness. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Each glance in the mirror revealed nothing but empty pavement, but my instinct was screaming that we were not alone. After a few minutes, she leaned forward, her breath quickening. Pull over there, by the old diner. We need to talk. I parked, hands still trembling. I could barely focus on the crunch of gravel beneath my feet as we stepped out into the chill night air. We found a spot that seemed obscured from view, nestled between two large dumpsters. What did you find? She asked, her eyes locked onto mine, trying to assess how much I truly knew. I don't know everything yet, but I think it connects back to my brother. I found his name in the files with yours, and he may have been onto something. I stammered, her gaze sharpened. If they are involved, we need to tread carefully. The truth isn't just a matter of finding out what happened. It's dangerous. What kind of danger? I couldn't help but ask. People have disappeared trying to uncover this, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Panic settled in my stomach. And what if they find out we're looking? What happens then? That's the part we need to prepare for, because if they know we're after this information, they won't hold back, she said, her tone grave. Before I could speak again, a loud crash echoed from farther down the street, followed by the sound of shouts. My heart raced. What was that? Then I saw a black SUV speeding toward us. Lights blared on. My breath caught. We have to go. Now. We sprinted toward my car, adrenaline surging. I could feel the weight of the truth closing in behind us, threatening to strike. What if they catch us? Just drive and don't look back, she said, fear driving her words. We need to find out what we really stumbled upon. I dove into the driver's seat, heart in my throat as I stepped on the gas. As the SUV roared closer, I realized that I would have to face whatever mystery awaited us, even if it meant uncovering the darkest corners of my brother's fate. The truth was hunting me, and I had no choice but to run. I hit the gas, the engine roaring to life as we took off. The SUV was gaining speed, its headlights piercing through the darkness like a predator closing in on its prey. I could feel her anxiety radiating from the passenger seat. Turn left here, she shouted, panic lacing her voice that I spun the steering wheel hard, tires screeching as we veered onto a side street. The ghost town of the industrial district surrounded us, boarded up buildings, and rusting machinery loomed ominously. My heart raced with each jolt of gravel beneath the tires. Do you know where we're going? He gasped, glancing ahead. I saw an old parking garage a block back. If we can get there, we might lose them, she said, her eyes scanning our surroundings. That I pushed the accelerator harder. Shadows danced across the pavement, blurring by like flickering memories. Every second felt critical. I could hear the rumble of the SUV behind us, growing louder with each moment. Finally, I spotted the parking garage, a looming structure, dark and foreboding. There! I shouted as I pulled in, rapidly parking in a dim corner. We both jumped out, scanning the garage for any signs of pursuit. Hurry, she urged, motioning toward a stairwell at the far end. We bolted towards it, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the empty space. I couldn't shake the feeling that the moment we got trapped inside this concrete maze was the moment we would be caught. I glanced back, but there was no sign of the SUV yet. We rushed up the stairs, hearts pounding. Each step felt like a race against time, driving me deeper into the building. We reached the rooftop, the dim light of the city barely filtering through the structure's grime. I could feel the cool wind whip around us, but it did little to calm my nerves. "Where now?" I asked, trying to catch my breath. "Just stay low and quiet," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We can see if they come in." We crouched low behind a ventilation unit, our backs pressed against the hard surface as we listened intently. The night was eerily quiet aside from the occasional rustle of wind. I glanced down at the street, squinting against the glare of the SUV's headlights as it pulled into the garage. "Looks like they're here," she whispered, her eyes wide. The SUV's engine cut off, and we could see figures emerge from the shadows. They moved with purpose, scanning the area with flashlights. Their faces were obscured, but every movement they made felt menacing. "What do we do?" I asked, fear creeping in. "Just keep quiet. We need to wait until they leave," she cautioned, gripping my arm tightly. Suddenly, one of the figures stumbled upon a clipboard thrown down earlier in our flight. "They were here," he shouted, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. Panic surged in my veins. They knew we were close. I dared to look over the side, and that's when I saw a small door on the opposite side of the rooftop. It led to another stairwell. "We can't stay here. We need to move," I said, urgency pouring in my words. She nodded. "On three." 1, 2 before she could finish. I heard a burst of voices growing louder. We needed to act fast. "Go," I said, sprinting toward the door. As we bolted across the rooftop, I felt the weight of unseen eyes tracking our every move. But there was no turning back now. We burst through the door, fleeing down the stairs. Somewhere behind us, I could hear them shuffling after us, the promise of danger pushing us onward. With every step, the shadows seemed to close in tighter around us. The truth still lay ahead, and I felt we were galloping right into it. We hit the stairwell, just as a shout echoed from above. They went up, searched the roof. A chill washed over me. They were closing in, and every second felt like a countdown. "Down," I hissed, pushing us into the narrow stairway. It spiraled down into darkness, and I could feel the gritty walls pressing in. The cold air felt thick with urgency, forcing me to move faster. We raced down another flight, but my mind was racing faster. "What'd they find us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to answer. "We just need to find a way out," I replied, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. Reaching the bottom floor, I paused to listen. The sounds of footsteps echoed from above, but it seemed quieter here. Shadows flickered in the dim light coming from a door at the end of the corridor. "Do you see anything?" she asked, peering over my shoulder. "Just a door. I think we should check it." My heart raced at the thought of what might be behind it. I could almost hear them coming down the stairs, growing closer. "All right, let us go." She followed me, her grip on my arm tightening as we crept toward the door. I reached for the handle, feeling an electric jolt of fear shoot through me. With a deep breath, I turned the knob and pushed it open. A heavy metal door swung wide, revealing a small utility room filled with dusty supplies and an abandoned generator. I stepped inside, pulling her in just as I heard the sound of heavy steps coming down the hall. "Okay," I whispered, scanning the room. There were shelves filled with rusty tools and old crates, but there was also a window at the far end that caught my eye. "Can we get out through there?" she asked, peering over my shoulder again. "Maybe. It's worth a shot." I moved to the window, my heart pounding against my ribcage. The glass was dirty but cracked open slightly, rusted hinges creaking as I pushed it wide enough to squeeze through. "Help me boost you up," I said, kneeling to support her weight. She climbed up on my shoulders, her breath quickening. Just as I was about to lift her, the door behind us rattled. "Get down," I shouted, throwing myself low while she struggled to keep her balance. A figure burst into the room, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. My heart skipped. I had to think fast. Now, I yelled, pushing her upward. She scrambled through the window as I ducked behind a crate, holding my breath. The figure's footsteps moved closer, the light flickering across the space. "Where are they?" he growled. My hands were clammy, and all I could hear was the frantic beating of my heart. I risked a glance and saw her dangling from the window. "Pull me," she mouthed, urgency written all over her face. As I lunged for her, the figure turned toward me. "There!" he shouted. I felt sheer panic grip me. I yanked her down just as the beam of light nearly blinded me. We hit the ground in a heap, barely escaping detection. "Go," I whispered. We scrambled toward the door leading back into the corridor, the footsteps now rapidly approaching. That's when I saw a service exit sign glowing faintly to the left. "This way." We darted toward it, adrenaline fueling our escape. But just as I reached for the handle, I paused. Behind us, I could hear angry voices drawing closer, and the last thing I wanted was to be cornered. Just then, I realized the doorway was blocked by a heavy stack of crates. My stomach dropped. They'd been waiting for us to come this way. "Wait, I have a plan," I urged, my mind racing with ideas. But deep down, uncertainty gnawed at me. Will my next move keep us safe, or lead us straight into their hands? The crates loomed in front of us, a wall of wood and uncertainty. I couldn't think of a way around them. The angry voices behind us were getting closer. I could practically feel the air thickening with their intent. "Maybe we could push them aside," she suggested, but I shook my head. "Too noisy. We need to be quick and quiet." I glanced back toward the doorway. The figure with the flashlight was still searching, but more footsteps were coming. The pressure built in my chest. I scanned the utility room again, heart racing. "The generator. Can you cover me?" I asked, taking a step toward it. "If I can get it started, we could create a distraction." She nodded, eyes wide, her grip tightening around a rusted wrench from the shelf. I moved to the generator, desperately fumbling with the cold metal, feeling around for the ignition. I could hear them talking, angry and impatient, and the low hum of the light as it flickered unervingly above us. "Please work," I thought, cranking the handle. At first, nothing happened. My heart sank, but then I smelled gasoline, and the machine sputtered to life with a roar. "Go," I shouted, turning back to her. But just then, the door at the end of the corridor slammed open. "Oh no," she whispered, frozen. "Get ready," I yelled, my hands frantically pulling on wires. The generator's sputtering continued, but I steadied myself, praying it would last long enough that I could see silhouettes approaching, a group of shadowy figures filling the doorframe. They hadn't spotted us yet, but it was only a matter of seconds. I shouted toward the generator and threw the emergency switch. The room flooded with a surprising brightness. "Now!" I pulled her toward the exit sign, her eyes flickering between me and the door. We darted for the opposite wall, dodging the view of the advancing figures. My breath came in quick bursts. When we reached the crates, I crouched down, signaling for her to follow. "What do we do?" she whispered urgently, peering around the edge of the last crate. "Just wait," I said, my heart hammering in my ears. The figures filled the room, their voices rising in confusion. "Where did they go?" One shouted. I could hear the annoyance in his tone, the desperation behind it. "Spread out. Check the vents," another ordered. I held my breath. Time seemed to stretch as we crouched there, hearts racing. Then, everything went silent. I exchanged a worried glance with her, unsure if we had really escaped their notice. "Let us move now," I urged quietly, pushing myself up and scanning the space. We needed to hurry, but where would we go? Then I spotted a set of pipes leading up toward the ceiling, an escape route. It was risky, but it was all we had. "Up there," I pointed. She nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. Just as we began to climb, I heard a loud crash behind us. The generator had finally lost power, and the light died, plunging us into darkness. Instinct kicked in. I pulled her closer, urging her to climb faster. But as the shadows thickened, I felt the unmistakable chill of dread. "Someone's coming," I said, as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed back in our direction. We had to hurry, but what lay above us was just as uncertain as the chaos behind. As I scrambled up the pipes, my fingers slipping against the cold metal, I could feel fear tightening around my throat. The sound of boots thumping closer made my heart race faster. I glanced down to see her struggling to keep up, eyes darting back to where we'd been hiding. "Keep going," I urged, the words barely escaping my lips as I pushed myself to ascend further. The shadows danced below us, and every creak of the pipes sent shivers down my spine. The last thing I wanted was to be caught, that we reached a small opening at the top of the pipes. My hands shook as I pulled myself into the dark space. I peered over the edge just as she hoisted herself up. "Where are we?" she whispered, her face pale and breathless that I looked around. The cramped space was filled with old boxes, dusty and neglected. "An old storage area, I think," I said, trying to catch my breath. The ceiling was low, but at least it felt safer than down there. Before I could relax, I heard the voices again, echoing in the distance. They had to be close. One shout made my stomach churn. "Check up there. Come on." I pulled her deeper into the room, quickly weaving around stacks of forgotten items. My mind raced as I searched for an exit or some way to barricade ourselves. There has to be something we can use. Then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed an odd flash of movement. "Wait," I said, halting her. There, half hidden behind a box, was a small door. My heart pounded in my chest. It was a chance that I crept toward the door, testing the handle. It was cold, but it turned easily. The faint sound of voices grew louder, and the fear coursed through me again. I pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. "This way." I motioned to her, urgency lacing my tone. As we slipped through the door, I closed it quietly, holding my breath for a moment. With shaky legs, we descended, each step muffled against the metal. The air was damp and musty. It felt like a different world down here. "Do you think they saw us?" she asked, glancing back nervously. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to keep quiet. We have to get out." The staircase eventually ended in a dimly lit hallway. Faint light flickered from a bulb overhead. The walls were lined with old peeling paint, and the smell of mold clung to the air. I felt trapped yet again, but we couldn't go back. "Where does this lead?" she whispered, fear creeping back into her voice. "I don't know," I replied, scanning the corridor for any signs. "Let us just keep moving." As we crept forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a nest of spiders. Each moment felt heavier. By the time we reached the end of the hallway, an unexpected sound made us freeze. It was the faint noise of metal scraping against metal. My breath caught in my throat. What could it be? I held her back, just behind the wall, listening intently, and that's when I saw a shadow moving on the other side of a half-open door. My fingers tightened around her arm. "Stay close," I said, feeling a chill race down my spine. The next seconds felt like an eternity as we waited, heartbeats synchronizing in dreadful anticipation. What would come next? I had no idea, but we couldn't let it find us. We stood there, barely breathing, the shadow dancing behind the door. It felt like the whole world had shrunk to that tiny space. Then, the scraping stopped. Silence wrapped around us like a heavy blanket. My heart thundered against my ribcage. I wanted to run, but I couldn't just leave her. A flicker of movement caught my eye. Someone was peering into the hallway. My mind raced. They were closer, and the last thing I needed was to make a sound. With frantic gestures, I signaled her to stay quiet. The shadow lingered for a moment, then disappeared back into the darkness behind the door. I risked a quick glance. The door was ajar, just wide enough for someone to slip through, but I felt a pull toward the unknown. "What do we do?" she whispered, the tremor in her voice matching the fear in my gut. I took a deep breath, trying to summon some courage. "We should see if we can get past them." I wanted to sound confident, but the words felt thin between us. "If we can sneak by, we might find an exit." She nodded, a hesitant agreement. We crept closer, my footfalls careful and silent on the cold floor. I nodded toward the door, hoping for a miracle. I slowly pushed it further open, holding my breath as the hinges creaked softly. The room beyond was dim, lit only by a single flickering bulb. Shadows clung to the corners, making it hard to see, An old desk sat against the wall, cluttered with papers and strange devices that looked out of place. But it was the sound of muffled voices that made my skin crawl. They were discussing something serious, but I couldn't make out the words. "We can't wait here," I whispered. "Let us find another way out." We stepped inside, scanning for any openings. Just as I was about to head for a door on the opposite side, the voices grew louder. One of them mentioned the subject and contingency protocols. It sent a jolt through me. What were they talking about? What kind of subjects? "I don't like this," she said, gripping my arm. "They might be coming for us." I glanced back at the door behind us, half expecting someone to burst through at any moment. "We need to be quick." We moved cautiously toward the other side of the room. My eyes darted between the door and the strange devices on the desk. One caught my attention, a small metallic box with a series of buttons. Something about it felt wrong, like it was waiting to be discovered that I couldn't resist. "Just a second." I stepped over to the desk, reaching out to touch it. The moment my fingers brushed against the surface, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. My heart dropped as I spun around. "They're here," I hissed, panic rising in my throat. We had to act fast. I yanked on the doorknob to the exit, but it was locked tight. The heavy thuds of their boots grew louder. I could hear their muffled shouts. "Help me," I urged, pulling at the handle. She joined me, desperation fueling our strength. The door wouldn't budge. Then everything went dark. The bulb overhead sputtered and died, plunging us into an impenetrable blackness. "Do you have your phone?" she whispered, her voice now trembling. "I can't see anything." I replied, frustration spilling over. "What now?" I felt my heartbeat soar. Whatever was waiting for us in the dark, it was closing in. We had to get out, but every second felt like an eternity. The fear of what lay behind us merged with the uncertainty of the shadows ahead. "Find a way," I urged, feeling an overwhelming need to escape. In that moment, a last-minute plan was forming. Once we got out of this, I was going to find out what the hell was really going on. And then I heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in a lock. Panic surged through me as the door creaked open and a beam of light sliced through the darkness. I instinctively pressed myself against the wall, my breath quickening. A figure stepped inside, flashlight illuminating the room with harsh edges that seemed to magnify our fears. We were trapped. "Where are they?" The figure barked, advancing into the space. My heart pounded in my chest as shadows flickered around us. My mind raced through options, but the door behind us was blocked. "Quick," I whispered, urging her toward a stack of boxes in the corner. We ducked low, just as the figure turned his attention to the desk. I held my breath, fearing that the tiniest noise would send them after us. The silence thickened, wrapping around us like a shroud. The voice of the man echoed again. They couldn't have gotten far. The flashlight danced over the room, drawing near to our hiding spot. My muscles tightened. I finally spotted a window, just behind the stack of boxes, small, but possibly our only way out. But we had to move now. "On three," I whispered. 1, 2 before I could finish. Footsteps echoed closer. I checked my watch. It was almost too late. 3, go. I pushed her toward the window, my heart racing as adrenaline surged through me. She made an awkward scramble toward the opening, but before she could climb through, the man turned again, flashlight beam zeroing in on her. "Stop!" In that instant, I threw myself at the figure, hoping to distract him long enough for her to escape. I felt a sharp jolt as his shoulder connected with mine. In the chaos, the flashlight skidded to the floor, casting a dizzying pattern of light across the room. "Get out!" I shouted, feeling a grip on my arm. I fought against it, quick glances showing her slipping through the window. Just as I felt a hand tighten around my wrist, I broke free and dove for the chaotic beam of light. I scrambled toward the shadows, pushing through the door that had been left ajar, knowing I couldn't look back. The corridor stretched endlessly. Fear propelled my feet. I didn't know where I was going, but any direction was a chance at freedom. I could hear voices rising, but their words melding into a chorus of threats and curses. Had they expected us to escape? "Down here!" I heard one shout, near my position. There was no time to lose. Somewhere in that haze of panic, I spotted another stairwell. Come on, come on, I muttered under my breath as I leaped through the doorway, pain flaring in my chest as I sprinted down. The descent felt endless, but at last, I burst through a door marked with a flickering sign. It led into an alley, cool night air washing over me like a reviving balm. The city surrounded me, but it felt alien, unsettled. Where are we? I mumbled, scanning the desolation. I glanced back, straining to listen for footsteps, my pulse a frantic rhythm. Nothing but silence for what felt like an eternity. Then, I spotted her, emerging from the shadows, her eyes lit with fear and relief. She stumbled toward me, breathless. I thought we have a go now. I interrupted. We dashed off, leaving the oppressive shadows behind us. The truth might still be lurking, but at this moment, we had escaped a fate far worse. The oppressive weight of unanswered questions hung between us like a storm. Yet, even under the streetlights, I could feel a shadow lingering just out of reach, a reminder that the night was not yet over. I don't think this is over, she said softly, reflecting my unease. No, it wasn't. I could already feel the whispers creeping back, nudging at the edges of my mind. We both knew, deep down, that the truth we sought might not ever truly be revealed. As we walked on, the chorus of shadows faded behind us. But something else lingered in my heart, a dark anticipation, a feeling that we would always be hunted by those secrets left untouched. I'd survive this night, but the question loomed larger than my escape. How many more nights would I have to run,